The evening sun was setting over the city of Chicago, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The streets were alive with the hum of cars and the distant chatter of people heading home after a long day. Judge Marcus Hayes sat behind the wheel of his sleek black sedan, tapping his fingers lightly on the steering wheel as he waited for the traffic light to turn green. He had just left the courthouse, where another grueling session had tested his patience and resolve. But now all he wanted was to get back to his quiet apartment, unwind, and maybe enjoy a cup of coffee while listening to some jazz. As the light turned green, Marcus eased the car forward, merging into the flow of traffic. The drive was peaceful, at first with nothing but the sound of tires rolling over asphalt and the occasional honk from an impatient driver. But then, out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. His heart sank slightly, though he tried not to let it show. Slowing down, he pulled the car to the side of the road, glancing in the mirror again to see a police cruiser pulling up behind him. Officer Ryan Carter stepped out of his vehicle, adjusting his belt as he approached Marcus's car. Ryan was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed perpetually scowling. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the fading sunlight. As he walked toward the sedan, his expression hardened further, his lips pressed into a thin line. Something about this stop felt different to him, off somehow, but he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Marcus rolled down his window, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer," he said politely, his voice calm and measured. "Is there a problem?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned down, peering into the car with narrowed eyes. His gaze swept over Marcus, taking in every detail: the tailored suit, the expensive watch, the dignified posture. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, these things made him uneasy. Maybe it was the way Marcus carried himself, exuding confidence without arrogance. Or maybe it was something deeper, something rooted in assumptions Ryan wasn't even aware he held. "License and registration," Ryan demanded, his tone clipped and authoritative. There was no warmth in his voice, only suspicion. Marcus nodded, reaching carefully into his pocket for his wallet. "Of course," he replied, pulling out his driver's license before leaning across the seat to retrieve the registration from the glove compartment. He handed both items to Ryan, who took them with a quick flick of his wrist. Ryan examined the documents closely, his eyes lingering on the name and photo. Marcus Hayes. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. Still, something about it nagged at him. It wasn't until he glanced at the license plate again that realization dawned, a jolt of recognition sparking in his mind. This man matched the description of someone he'd heard about recently, someone important. "You're a judge?" Ryan asked abruptly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes, I am," Marcus confirmed, meeting Ryan's gaze steadily. "Judge Marcus Hayes. I preside over cases at the Cook County Courthouse." For a moment, Ryan said nothing, his jaw tightening, as if he were chewing on the information. Then, almost instinctively, his defenses went up. "How do I know this isn't fake?" he challenged, holding up the ID. "Anyone can print one of these nowadays." Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the accusation. "I assure you it's legitimate," he said evenly, though a hint of irritation crept into his tone. "If you'd like, you can verify it with the courthouse directly." But Ryan wasn't convinced. In fact, his skepticism only grew stronger. To him, this whole situation felt too convenient. A black man driving a luxury car, flashing around, credentials claiming to be a judge? It didn't add up, or so he thought. He crossed his arms, leaning closer to the open window. "Funny how you just happen to have all the answers ready to go," he remarked sarcastically. "Where are you? Coming from tonight, Judge Hayes?" "I told you already I'm leaving the courthouse," Marcus replied, his patience beginning to wear thin. "I've been working late, as usual. You can check my schedule if you don't believe me." Ryan smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, I'll do more than check your schedule," he shot back. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Marcus hesitated, his grip tightening slightly on the steering wheel. He knew better than to argue with an officer during a traffic stop, especially given the power dynamics at play. But this entire interaction felt wrong, unfair even. Still, he forced himself to remain composed, unbuckling his seatbelt and stepping out of the car. The cool evening air hit him as he stood facing Ryan, who towered over him despite being only slightly taller. Ryan circled the vehicle slowly, inspecting it with exaggerated scrutiny. "Nice ride," he commented dryly. "Must be nice to afford something like this on a judge's salary." Marcus clenched his fists briefly before letting them fall to his sides. "I work hard for what I have," he said firmly, "and I earned every penny of it." Ryan stopped pacing and turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "We'll see about that," he muttered under his breath. Just as tensions reached their peak, a strange sensation filled the air, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. Both men froze, their argument forgotten as they looked around in confusion. The source of the noise became apparent moments later, when a flicker of light appeared in the distance, growing brighter and larger with each passing second. "What the hell is that?" Ryan exclaimed, shielding his eyes as the light enveloped them. Marcus squinted against the brilliance, trying to make sense of what was happening. Before either of them could react, the light surged forward, swallowing them whole. When the brightness faded, they found themselves standing in a completely unfamiliar environment. Gone were the streets of Chicago. Instead, they were surrounded by smooth metallic walls and glowing panels that pulsed with energy. Standing before them were two figures, tall, slender beings with luminous skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. They introduced themselves as Zara and Kyle, emissaries from a distant galaxy. Zara spoke first, her voice melodic yet firm. "You have been brought here because Earth stands at a crossroads," she explained. "Your species has great potential, but also great flaws. We wish to test whether individuals such as yourselves can transcend prejudice and work together for the greater good." Kale gestured toward a shimmering portal nearby. "You will enter a simulated reality designed to challenge your beliefs and actions. Only by cooperating can you hope to succeed, and perhaps inspire others to follow your example." Before Marcus or Ryan could respond, the portal flared to life, pulling them inside. And just like that, their lives and their understanding of each other would never be the same. The world around Marcus and Ryan dissolved into a blur of colors and light, spinning faster and faster until they both felt disoriented. When the chaos finally settled, they found themselves standing in a place that looked eerily similar to Chicago. But not quite. The streets were cracked and uneven, littered with debris from buildings that had been reduced to rubble. Smoke curled into the sky, and the air carried the faint smell of ash and decay. It was as if the city had been torn apart by some catastrophic event. Marcus stumbled forward, trying to steady himself as his mind raced to process what he was seeing. "Where are we?" he asked aloud, though he wasn't sure if anyone would answer. His voice echoed strangely, bouncing off the crumbling walls of nearby structures. Ryan, meanwhile, was scanning the area with wide eyes, his hand instinctively reaching for the holster at his side, only to realize he wasn't carrying a weapon anymore. He frowned, irritation mixing with confusion. "What is this? Some kind of trick?" he muttered under his breath. Before either man could say more, Zara's melodic voice filled the air again, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This is your test," she explained calmly. "A simulation designed to reflect the consequences of division and prejudice. Your task is simple. Find a way to restore balance and cooperation among the survivors." Kyle's deeper voice joined hers. "But beware. The choices you make here will shape not only your fate, but the future of this world, and perhaps your own." With that, the voices fell silent, leaving Marcus and Ryan alone in the desolate landscape. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply stood there, taking in their surroundings, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "We need to figure out what's going on," he said, turning to face Ryan. "If those beings were telling the truth, then we don't have time to waste." Ryan crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "And why should I trust anything you say?" he shot back. "For all I know, this is still part of whatever game you're playing." Marcus sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Look, I don't like this any more than you do, he replied evenly. But arguing isn't going to help us. We're stuck here together, whether we like it or not, so unless you've got a better idea, we might as well work together. Ryan hesitated, clearly torn between his instincts and the logic of Marcus's words. After a long pause, he nodded reluctantly. Fine, he said gruffly. But don't think this means I trust you. Fair enough, Marcus agreed, offering a small smile. Let's start by finding shelter. This place doesn't look safe. As they began walking, they quickly realized that the ruined city wasn't entirely deserted. Scattered groups of people moved cautiously through the wreckage, their faces gaunt and weary. Most kept their distance, eyeing Marcus and Ryan with suspicion before hurrying away. But one group, a small cluster of men and women huddled near the remains of a collapsed building, seemed willing to talk. Marcus approached them carefully, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Excuse me, he called out softly. Can you tell us what happened here? One of the women, her hair streaked with gray and dirt smudged across her face, glanced up at him warily. You really don't know? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. No, Marcus admitted. We woke up here. Can you explain? The woman exchanged glances with her companions before speaking. It started with distrust, she said bitterly. People divided themselves into factions based on race, class, beliefs, anything they could use to justify hating each other. Then came the fighting, the riots, the collapse of order. Now, everyone's just trying to survive. Marcus listened intently, his brow furrowing. Is there anyone trying to fix things? He asked. Anyone working to bring people back together? The woman shook her head sadly. Not anymore. Anyone who tries gets silenced or worse. Ryan, who had been standing silently behind Marcus, stepped forward now. So basically, everyone's given up, he stated bluntly. Pretty much, the woman confirmed. She gestured toward a distant tower rising above the ruins. That's where the strongest faction is holed up. They control most of the resources and keep everyone else scared. If you're looking for answers, that's probably where you'll find them. Marcus thanked her, and the two men continued on their way. As they walked, Ryan couldn't help but notice how Marcus seemed to carry himself differently here, less like a judge and more like a leader. There was a quiet confidence about him, a sense of purpose that made Ryan feel oddly unsettled. You seem awfully calm for someone stranded in a post-apocalyptic nightmare, Ryan remarked after a while. Marcus shrugged. I've seen my share of chaos, he replied. In courtrooms, in neighborhoods, in families. People always think their differences are insurmountable, but they're not. What matters is whether they're willing to try. Ryan snorted. Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up the way I did? Oh? Marcus raised an eyebrow. And how did you grow up? Ryan hesitated, caught off guard by the question. He hadn't expected Marcus to ask about his past, let alone show interest. Tough neighborhood, he said finally. Lots of crime, lots of fear. Cops were either useless or corrupt. I joined the force because I wanted to make a difference. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's admirable, Marcus said sincerely. But sometimes wanting to help isn't enough. Sometimes we have to confront our own biases too. Ryan bristled at the implication. Are you saying I'm biased? I'm saying we all are, Marcus countered gently. It's human nature. The key is recognizing it and choosing to rise above it. They lapsed into silence again as they neared the tower. Its shadow loomed over them, dark and imposing. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Clearly, getting inside wouldn't be easy. We need a plan, Marcus murmured, crouching behind a pile of rubble to avoid being spotted. Ryan nodded, his tactical instincts kicking in. I'll distract them, he suggested. Draw their attention away from the entrance. You slip in while they're focused on me. Marcus frowned. That's risky. What if something happens to you? It's the best chance we've got, Ryan insisted. Besides, I can handle myself. Marcus studied him for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. All right, but be careful. Ryan smirked, though there was no real humor in it. Always am. With that, he stood and stepped out into the open, shouting loudly to catch the guard's attention. "Hey, over here!" he yelled, waving his arms. "Yeah, you heard me." The guards reacted immediately, rushing toward him with weapons drawn. Meanwhile, Marcus darted toward the entrance, moving swiftly and quietly. He reached the door just as the sound of gunfire erupted behind him. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus, slipping inside unnoticed. Inside the tower, the atmosphere was tense. Survivors milled about nervously, avoiding eye contact with the heavily armed enforcers stationed throughout the space. Marcus moved cautiously, searching for clues about the faction's leadership and motives. Eventually, he found himself in a large room dominated by a massive screen displaying propaganda messages urging loyalty and obedience. At the center of the room stood a man dressed in military fatigues, barking orders to his subordinates. Marcus recognized him instantly. It was a younger version of Ryan, or at least someone who bore a striking resemblance. Shock rippled through him as he realized the truth. This faction was led by someone who embodied everything Ryan hated and feared about authority. Suddenly, Ryan burst into the room, breathing hard but unharmed. He froze when he saw the leader, his expression twisting with anger and disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded, glaring at Marcus. "Some kind of sick joke?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "It's a mirror. A reflection of what happens when fear and hatred go unchecked." Ryan stared at him, then at the leader, his fists clenched tightly. For a moment it seemed like he might lash out, but instead he took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "So what do we do now?" he asked, his voice low and determined. "We stop them," Marcus replied firmly. "Together." And for the first time since their journey began, Ryan didn't argue. Instead, he nodded, ready to face whatever came next. Marcus and Ryan stood side by side in the dimly lit room, their eyes fixed on the man at its center. The leader of the faction, Ryan's doppelganger, was shouting orders to his followers, his voice sharp and commanding. His presence radiated authority, but there was something cold and calculating about him, a sense of detachment that made Marcus uneasy. "We need to act fast," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low so only Ryan could hear. "If we don't stop him, this place will stay divided forever." Ryan nodded, though his jaw remained clenched. Seeing someone who looked so much like himself leading a group built on fear and oppression had shaken him deeply. It wasn't just anger he felt, it was shame. Shame for recognizing parts of himself in the man before them, parts he didn't want to admit existed. "What's the plan?" Ryan asked, his tone more serious than it had been before. Marcus glanced around the room, taking in the layout. Armed guards were stationed near the exits, their weapons ready. Civilians huddled together, too afraid to speak or move. The screen behind the leader continued to flash messages of loyalty and obedience, reinforcing the fear that kept everyone in line. "We take out the leader," Marcus said finally. "Without him, the rest of them might lose direction. People are scared, not evil. If we can show them another way, they might listen." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you propose we take him out?" "He's surrounded by armed men." Marcus hesitated, then reached into his pocket. To his surprise, he found a small device, a sleek black box with blinking lights. He frowned, turning it over in his hands. "I think this is from the aliens," he muttered. "They must have given it to us for a reason." Ryan leaned closer, examining the object. "What does it do?" "I'm not sure," Marcus admitted, "but I think it's our best shot." The two men exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to trust each other, at least for now. They moved cautiously through the shadows, avoiding the guards' notice as they approached the leader's platform. The air was tense, every step feeling heavier than the last. One wrong move, and they'd be caught. When they were close enough, Marcus held up the device, pressing a button on its surface. A beam of light shot out, enveloping the leader and freezing him mid-sentence. The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. "Who are you?" one of the guards shouted, raising his weapon toward Marcus and Ryan. Before either man could respond, the leader began to speak, not in his usual harsh tone but softly, almost vulnerably. "I was once like you," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "Scared, angry, desperate to protect what little I had left. But my fear turned into hatred, and my hatred destroyed everything." The crowd murmured among themselves, unsure of what was happening. Some stepped back while others edged closer, curiosity overriding their fear. "This isn't real," another guard yelled, aiming his gun at the frozen leader. "It's some kind of trick." Ryan stepped forward, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's not a trick," he said firmly. "This is what happens when we let fear control us, when we divide ourselves instead of working together. Look around you. This world is falling apart because of it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, one of the civilians stepped forward. She was young, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Is it true?" she asked hesitantly. "Can we really fix things?" Marcus nodded, meeting her gaze with a steady look. "Yes," he said, "but it won't be easy. We'll have to trust each other, even when it's hard. We'll have to forgive even when it hurts, and we'll have to believe that change is possible." The woman hesitated, then nodded. Others began to follow her lead, stepping forward tentatively. The guards lowered their weapons, uncertainty replacing their earlier aggression. Seeing this shift, the leader's image flickered and disappeared, leaving only the empty platform behind. The room grew quiet again, the weight of the moment settling over everyone. Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That was intense," he muttered, glancing at Marcus. "Do you think they'll actually listen?" "They already are," Marcus replied, gesturing to the growing crowd. "Change starts small, but it spreads quickly if people are willing to embrace it." As the survivors began discussing their next steps, Marcus and Ryan slipped away, retreating to a quieter corner of the tower. Exhaustion washed over them both, the adrenaline from the confrontation fading into a deep sense of relief, and something else. Respect. "You handled yourself well back there," Marcus said after a while, breaking the silence. Ryan shrugged, though there was a hint of pride in his expression. "So did you. Guess we make a decent team." Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe better than decent." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't push your luck, Judge." Despite the joke, there was warmth in his tone. For the first time since their journey began, the tension between them felt lighter, less suffocating. They weren't friends, yet, not quite. But they were getting closer. As they rested, Zara's voice suddenly filled the air again, soft and melodic. "You have done well," she said, her words carrying a note of approval. "But your test is not yet complete. There is still much work to be done." Kale's deeper voice joined hers. "The choices you make here will shape the future of this world, and perhaps your own. Remember, unity requires sacrifice." With that, the voices faded, leaving Marcus and Ryan alone once more. They shared a glance, both understanding what needed to happen next. "We should check on the others," Marcus suggested, standing up. "Make sure they're okay." Ryan nodded, rising to his feet. "Yeah, let's go." Together, they made their way back to the main room, where the survivors were beginning to organize themselves. Groups formed, plans were made, and for the first time in what felt like ages, there was a sense of hope in the air. Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice calm but firm. "We've taken the first step," he said. "But rebuilding won't be easy. It'll require effort, patience, and trust. Are you ready to try?" A chorus of voices answered him, not loudly but with conviction. "Yes." Ryan watched silently, his arms crossed, but there was a spark of admiration in his eyes. He stepped forward, adding his own words. "Fear doesn't protect us," he said, "it divides us. From now on, we stand together, or we fall apart." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the ruined tower. For the first time, Marcus and Ryan saw glimpses of the world these people could create. A world united, not divided. But as they stood there, basking in the moment, neither man noticed the faint shimmer in the air above them. The simulation wasn't over yet, and the true test of their resolve was still to come. The mood in the tower had shifted. Where there had once been fear and division, there was now a fragile sense of hope. The survivors, inspired by Marcus and Ryan's words, began working together to clean up the space, share resources, and plan for the future. It wasn't perfect. Arguments still broke out and old tensions lingered, but progress was undeniable. For the first time in what felt like forever, people were talking instead of shouting, listening instead of accusing. Marcus moved among the crowd, offering guidance where needed. His calm demeanor and steady presence reassured those who doubted whether this newfound unity could last. He reminded them that change didn't happen overnight, but that every small effort mattered. "We're building something new here," he told a group of men struggling to clear debris. "Something stronger than hate, stronger than fear." Ryan, meanwhile, found himself drawn to the guards who had once enforced the leader's oppressive rule. Many of them looked lost, unsure of their place now that the power structure they'd relied on was crumbling. Ryan approached one of them, a young man with haunted eyes, and spoke quietly. "You don't have to keep doing what you've always done," he said. "You can choose a different path, one where you protect people instead of controlling them." The guard hesitated, then nodded slowly. I just wanted to survive," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know," Ryan replied, "and so did everyone else here. But surviving isn't enough. We need to live. With purpose. With meaning." As the hours passed, Marcus and Ryan continued to guide the survivors, each playing to their strengths. Marcus focused on fostering trust and cooperation, while Ryan worked to dismantle the remnants of the old system and replace it with something fairer. Together they made a formidable team, though neither would admit it aloud. But just as things seemed to be improving, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. At first it was subtle, a slight vibration that could easily be dismissed as fatigue or imagination. But soon the shaking grew stronger, accompanied by a low rumbling sound that echoed through the ruins of the city. "What's happening now?" Ryan shouted over the noise, gripping a nearby wall for balance. Marcus scanned the horizon, his expression grim. In the distance, dark clouds were gathering, swirling unnaturally fast. Lightning crackled within them, illuminating the sky with an eerie glow. "This doesn't feel natural," he said, his voice tight with concern. "It's almost like the simulation is testing us again," Ryan finished, his jaw tightening. "Great, just what we needed." The trembling intensified, sending chunks of debris tumbling from the damaged buildings around them. Panic rippled through the crowd as people scrambled for cover. Marcus raised his hands, trying to calm them down. "Stay together," he called out. "We can get through this if we stick together." Ryan nodded, moving quickly to help organize the chaos. "Everyone inside," he ordered, ushering people toward the relative safety of the tower. "Now!" Once everyone was inside, Marcus and Ryan stood at the entrance watching as the storm outside escalated. Winds howled, tearing apart whatever remained of the ruined city. The air crackled with energy, and the ground split open in jagged fissures. It was as if the world itself was falling apart. Then, without warning, a massive figure emerged from the storm, a towering being made entirely of light and shadow. Its form shifted constantly, impossible to pin down, yet its presence was undeniable. The survivors gasped, some falling to their knees in awe or terror. Zara's voice rang out, calm but urgent. "This is the final trial," she announced. "To prove your worth, you must confront the embodiment of humanity's greatest flaws: fear, prejudice, and division. Only by overcoming these forces can you restore balance to this world." Kyle's deeper voice followed hers. Remember, the strength to prevail lies not in individual power, but in unity. The being stepped forward, its movements fluid, yet menacing. As it approached, images began to flicker across its surface, scenes of hatred, violence, and despair. Wars, riots, betrayals, all the darkest moments of human history played out before their eyes. The weight of it was overwhelming, pressing down on them like a physical force. Marcus staggered under the pressure but forced himself to stand tall. "We can't let it win," he said, his voice strained but resolute. "If we give in to fear, we lose everything." Ryan clenched his fists, his body tense. "How do we fight something like that?" he asked, glancing at Marcus. "It's not even real." "It doesn't matter if it's real," Marcus replied. "What matters is how we respond. Fear is real. Prejudice is real. Division is real. That's what we're fighting against. Not the creature itself, but the ideas it represents." The being loomed closer, its gaze locking onto them. It reached out with a tendril of shadow wrapping it around Ryan's chest. He cried out, struggling against its grip, but the more he fought, the tighter it held him. Memories flooded his mind, painful ones he'd tried to bury. His father's disapproval, his mother's tears, the faces of those he'd failed to protect during his years on the force. Each memory cut deeper than the last, threatening to break him. "Ryan!" Marcus shouted, lunging forward to grab his arm. "Don't let it win, you're stronger than this." Ryan gritted his teeth, tears streaming down his face. "I can't," he choked out, his voice breaking. "It's too much." "Yes, you can," Marcus insisted, pulling with all his strength. "Think about why you became a cop. Think about the people who believed in you, the ones who still do." For a moment Ryan froze, caught between despair and determination. Then with a roar of defiance he shoved the shadowy tendril away, breaking free of its grasp. The being recoiled, momentarily stunned. Breathing heavily, Ryan turned to Marcus, his eyes blazing with resolve. "All right," he said, wiping the tears from his face. "Let's finish this." Together they faced the being standing shoulder to shoulder. Around them, the survivors rallied, forming a circle of support. Though none of them fully understood what was happening, they instinctively knew that Marcus and Ryan were their best chance at survival. "We're not afraid of you," Marcus declared, his voice ringing out loud and clear. "We see you for what you are, a reflection of our own weaknesses, but we refuse to let you define us." Ryan stepped forward, adding his voice to Marcus's. "We choose to rise above fear, above hatred, above division, and we'll keep choosing it no matter what." The being paused, its shifting form faltering. For a brief moment it seemed to shrink, its power waning, but then with a deafening roar it surged forward, determined to crush them. Marcus and Ryan braced themselves, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, the survivors joined hands, creating a chain of solidarity. Their combined strength radiated outward, forming a barrier of light that pushed back against the darkness. The battle raged on, each side refusing to yield. But slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn. The being's form flickered, its confidence wavering. With one final, desperate cry, it dissolved into nothingness, leaving only silence in its wake. As the storm subsided and the trembling stopped, the survivors erupted into cheers, hugging each other and celebrating their victory. Marcus and Ryan stood in the center of it all, exhausted but triumphant. "You did it," Marcus said, turning to Ryan with a grin. "We did it." Ryan shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Don't start getting mushy on me, Judge." Marcus laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Wouldn't dream of it." Above them, Zara and Kale's voices returned, filled with pride. "You have proven yourselves worthy," Zara said. "Through courage, empathy, and unity, you have shown that humanity has the potential to transcend its flaws." Kyle added, "Your journey does not end here. When you return to your world, remember the lessons you have learned. Change begins with you." With that, the shimmering portal reappeared, pulling Marcus and Ryan back toward their reality. As they stepped through, they knew their lives would never be the same. and neither would the world they were returning to. The world came rushing back to Marcus and Ryan in an instant. One moment they were standing in the ruins of the simulated city, surrounded by cheering survivors. The next, they were back on the quiet Chicago street where their journey had begun. The traffic light ahead glowed red, casting a soft glow over the pavement. Cars moved slowly past them, oblivious to the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. For a long moment, neither man spoke. They simply stood there, trying to process everything they'd experienced. The alien ship, the simulation, the battles they'd fought. None of it felt like a dream. It was too vivid, too real. And yet here they were, back in their ordinary lives with no physical evidence to prove any of it had happened. Ryan broke the silence first, his voice low and thoughtful. "So, what now?" he asked, glancing at Marcus. "Do we just go back to how things were?" Marcus shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "No," he replied firmly. "We don't." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Marcus explained, "we've been given a chance, a rare opportunity to make a difference. Back there, in that simulation, we saw what happens when fear and division take hold. We also saw what's possible when people come together. Now it's up to us to bring that lesson into the real world." Ryan frowned, crossing his arms. "Easier said than done," he muttered. "Out here, it's not as simple as stopping some glowing monster or uniting a bunch of survivors. People are complicated, stubborn. They don't change overnight." "You're right," Marcus admitted. "It won't be easy, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Change starts small, with one conversation, one act of kindness, one decision to see someone differently. If we can do that, others will follow." Ryan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. He thought about the leader in the simulation, the man who looked so much like him, and the choices he'd made out of fear and anger. He thought about the guards he'd spoken to, the ones who wanted to believe there was another way but didn't know how to start. And he thought about himself, about the biases he carried without even realizing it. "All right," he said finally, looking up at Marcus. "Let's say I'm in. What's step one?" Marcus smiled, clearly pleased by Ryan's willingness. "Step one is leading by example. In your case, that means changing how you approach your job. You have a lot of power as a police officer, power that can either build trust or tear it down. Start small. Listen more. Assume less. Show people that you care about justice, not just authority." Ryan nodded slowly, considering the advice. "And for you?" he asked. "What's your step one?" "For me," Marcus said, "it's using my position to bridge gaps. Judges have influence, but too often, we stay removed from the communities we serve. I want to change that. I'll work harder to connect with people, to understand their struggles, and to advocate for reforms that address the root causes of crime, not just punish its symptoms." They both fell silent again, the weight of their commitment settling over them. It wasn't going to be easy, neither man had any illusions about that, but they felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, they truly believed that change was possible, even in a world as flawed as theirs. As they parted ways, each returning to their respective routines, they couldn't help but notice subtle shifts in their perspectives. Ryan found himself pausing before reacting to situations, questioning his assumptions instead of acting on instinct. When he pulled over a driver later that week, he made a conscious effort to treat them with respect, regardless of their background. To his surprise, the interaction went smoothly, leaving both parties feeling heard and understood. Marcus, meanwhile, began reaching out to community leaders, initiating conversations about systemic issues within the legal system. At first, progress was slow. Some were skeptical of his intentions, but over time he earned their trust. Together they drafted proposals for policy changes aimed at reducing racial disparities in sentencing and improving access to legal resources for marginalized groups. Word of their efforts spread, inspiring others to take action. Officers under Ryan's command noticed his new approach and followed suit, fostering better relationships with the neighborhoods they patrolled. Lawyers and judges who worked alongside Marcus adopted similar practices, prioritizing fairness and empathy in their rulings. Months passed and the ripple effects of their actions became undeniable. Crime rates dropped in areas where trust between law enforcement and residents improved. Courtrooms operated with greater transparency, earning public confidence. Most importantly, people started talking to each other again, really talking, not just arguing or avoiding difficult conversations. One evening, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was Ryan, inviting him to grab coffee after work. They met at a small cafe downtown, sliding into a booth near the window. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost friendly, a far cry from the tension that had defined their initial encounter. "So," Ryan said, stirring sugar into his cup, "how's it going? Still pushing for reform?" Marcus chuckled. "Every day," he replied. "It's slow work, but it's worth it. What about you? Any updates from the force?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, actually. We've implemented some new training programs focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. Early feedback's been positive. Not everyone's on board yet, but it's a start." "That's great," Marcus said sincerely. "You should be proud." Ryan shrugged modestly, though a hint of pride showed in his expression. "I couldn't have done it without your example," he admitted. "Seeing you put yourself out there made me realize I could too." Marcus smiled, raising his cup in a mock toast. "To teamwork, then," he said. "To teamwork," Ryan echoed, clinking his cup against Marcus's. As they sat there, chatting about their projects and sharing ideas for the future, they realized something important. The bond they'd formed during the simulation hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. They weren't just colleagues or acquaintances anymore. They were allies united by a shared vision of a better world. Outside the cafe, the city buzzed with life. Cars honked, pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, and the sun dipped below. The horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. It was a scene of everyday chaos, yet there was beauty in it. A reminder that even amidst imperfection, hope persisted. Neither Marcus nor Ryan knew what challenges lay ahead. They understood that prejudice and division wouldn't disappear overnight, that setbacks would inevitably occur. But they also knew that as long as they kept working toward change, they could inspire others to do the same.